Welcome to Latitude 40, brought to you by the Furneaux Collective. This podcast celebrates the heart, soul and history of the Furneaux Group, told by the people who call these islands home. Here we share stories of island life, of resilience and connection, of land and sea, of old ways and new beginnings, from the windswept shores to the heart of our communities. Each episode captures a piece of what makes this island life so unique. So islanders and visitors alike, settle in and join us as we explore the stories that shape the spirit of the Furneaux Islands, one voice at a time. Hello and welcome to Latitude 40. I'm your host, Jacqui Cooper. Thank you so much for joining me. Today's conversation is with someone whose life story is closely woven into the history and heart of not just Flinders Island, but also Vansittart Island. Vansittart Island lies off the northeast tip of Cape Barren Island at the eastern end of Franklin Sound, about 7 kilometres south of Lady Barren. Gwen Bailey is a much-loved and deeply respected member of our community. Her family connections here stretch back generations. Her family was born on nearby Vansittart Island, and her father was part of the Robinson family from Badger Corner. As a young woman, Gwen worked at Bowman's store, cycling several kilometres along Coast Road in wind, rain and sunshine, just to reach the corner where she could catch a lift into Whitemark with Bill Riddle. Not long after, in 1962, she began working for Don Bailey in the island's first self-service store, in a building many of us know now as the Tab Shack. That job would change the course of her life. Gwen and Don soon began courting and were married the following year. Together, they built a life that combines business, farming, family and service to their island community. Beyond family and business, Gwen also gave nearly 30 years of service as a lay reader, leading church services, visiting people in hospital and helping families farewell their loved ones. Gwen's life has held great joy, deep commitment and also moments of profound loss. Yet through it all, she remained someone known for her strength, faith, humour and kindness. Gwen, thank you so much for joining me today.
That's lovely, Jacqui. Thank you. I'm excited. I'm just excited to tell my story and it's just a pleasure to be here.
That's fantastic. So Gwen, your family connections to these islands go back a long way. Can you tell us how your mother's family first came to live on Vansittart?
Yes, well, the old fellow that was running Vansittart, well, I suppose he had a lease on it, Alec Ross, he wanted a companion for his son, young Alec, and he went to Hobart to an orphanage to try and find a young lad to come and be this companion. And, of course, he found my grandfather. So he brought him to Vansittart and he grew up there being a friend to young Alec and, of course, later on working for Alec around the farm as well. He met my mum, who at that stage was living at what we used to call Possum Boat Harbour. It's now White Beach, and there was a home there where the Wests were living. And Grandma was Gladys Ivy West, and she met grandfather and got married, and, of course, she went to Vansittart to live, and they had 8 children. First little girl, Auntie Mary, was only 4, and she died on Vansittart, and her grave is still there. She died with what we would call gastro, and I guess she got very dehydrated and they didn't know what to do. You know, just a little 4-year-old, and her grave is over the back of Vansittart facing Cape Barren where they used to live. And, you know, life was so tough. Grandad had to build the coffin and Grandma lined it with calico, put the baby in to bury her.
How beautiful.
And, I mean, that is what life was all about. They just had to take care of themselves, you know. The only way on and off the island was by sailing boat. And, you know, if that ever grounded, because Mum's brother got snake bitten and the boat was aground, and by the time they got him to Lady Barren, he couldn't move his legs. There was an old doctor called Dr. Connell, and they had to take him to Whitemark, but couldn't do anything. He died. And they had to be really tough. back then to be able to survive living in these conditions, didn't they?
Absolutely. We think we're isolated here at times, but it's nothing compared to what it was back then.
No.
So, Gwen, your father's side was the Robinson family from Badger Corner.
Yes, the Robinson house was the house there that, Maureen Riddle lives in now.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a church built there as well that was the Robinson family church. As the family grew up and left Badger Corner, moved down the coast road, the church was given to the community and moved to Lady Barron.
Oh.
By horse and logs, I think. I don't know how they did it, but, yeah, the church in Lady Barron was the church at Badger Corner.
Isn't that amazing?
And that's how Mum and Dad met, because they used to come from Vansittart to Badger Corner to go to church.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
That's commitment, isn't it?
It is commitment.
Yeah, so that's what brought your mum and dad together to live on Flinders then?
Definitely.
Meeting at church?
When the Cook family left Vansittart to come to Flinders, they moved to what we call Fern Hill, just out of Lady Barron. Gail Grace has got a house there now. That's where they moved to, and I think Mum was 16. And so her and Dad started up a courtship after that and played tennis and went to dances and ended up marrying and having 3 children, Pearl, my sister, and Brian, my brother.
Beautiful. And so what are your earliest memories of growing up with your siblings here on the island?
Oh, just natural fun, you know. We had a cubby house in the trees, in a pine tree, and we had a cubby house on the beach because we lived very close to the beach. Lots of swimming. My first recollections, we didn't have a car. We had an old horse called Mabel and a cart that went behind her that we used to go out and get loads of wood in or travel to Lady Barron if the need be. But we used to walk to Lady Barron to church every Sunday. Sunday school and church, the grown-ups would go to church and we'd go to the Sunday school in the old hall.
Oh, yes.
The hall used to be beside the church then. And then Dad had an old motorbike. So I reckon I would have been 5 or 6 when he got his first car, and it was a Hillman. It was sort of a maroony colour, I remember. It was nothing for us to walk to places, walk to visit aunties and uncles, and there was an old guy that lived across the lane by the name of George Davey, and at 14 I used to go over and sweep his house out every Saturday, and the broom he gave me to use was bunches of tea tree tied together on a handle. He always kept it very green. You know, if it dried at all, it would start to fall apart. And that's what I swept his house out with every day, for a few shillings. Shillings, I used to just clean his house for him. And Dad made me this step thing that you could climb over the fence. So many steps up and you climbed over the top and so many steps down to get through the barbed wire fence.
To get to work.
To get to work.
But as a young lady, Gwen, you worked at Bowman's store. Was that your first job?
It was straight out of school. I went to work at Bowman's and I worked with Elvie, Ruth, Mel Blunston, Mrs Wise and Stella Hay, Gertie Wise and Stella Hay. It was lovely. I loved working there, and back then the Aggie Bank had just settled and we used to do orders for the people out on the farms, and the buses used to call and pick up these boxes of groceries and deliver with the children as they picked them up from school.
Yes.
It was great fun. I loved working at Bowman's. Stan used to get the paper and stand there and read that every day and chat to everyone that came into the store. And Bowman's had everything, from a safety pin to a plastic chair or whatever. You could get anything there.
So how did you get to work then?
Well, that was very difficult. I had a bike, a push bike, and I used to ride the push bike from Leafmore Cottage. I think it was about 4 k's to Badger Corner to catch a ride with Bill Riddle. Coming home, I'd get a ride home with Lois Robinson, my cousin. So I did that for the full 12 months I worked at Bowman's.
Gosh.
And Bill had a ute, a bench seat ute, and he used to get to Harry Russell's and pick Harry Russell up, and then around the corner and pick up Lindsay Hardy. So I'd make Harry get out of the car put Lindsay in the middle because I had to sit on someone's knee and I wasn't going to sit on Lindsay Hardy's knee. So I used to sit on Harry's knee and, no seat belts and 4 people in the front. These days, I mean, you just couldn't do it.
No, that's right. So, Gwen, prior to working for and later marrying your husband, Don, he worked in Melbourne and trained as an instruments engineer working on aeroplanes. He later returned and worked for the Aggie Bank as head engineer and mechanic. He then opened up his own business in Lady Baron, and I understand he sold everything from paint to clothes and even some groceries. So in 1962, you began working for Don Bailey in the island's first service store, located in buildings locals now know as the Tav Shack. Gwen, what did it take for Don to convince you to leave Bowman's and join him in his new business?
Well, that's another funny story because my sister worked for Tom Langley at Island Stores and she'd been there, I guess, because she was 4 years older than I, so she'd been there probably 4 years. And Don decided he would call up home one evening and ask Pearl to go and work for him. And she was horrified. She said, "How could I do that? How could I leave Mr. Langley after 4 years and go and work for you?" "Oh, no, definitely not." So Dad piped up and he said, "Well, Don, what about Gwen? She works at Bowman's and she has to get a ride up there and a ride home and rain, hail or sunshine. And she's worked there for 12 months, so what about giving her a chance?" And of course Don said, "Oh, but she hasn't had much experience. I really want someone, with the experience that they can stay there if I'm out delivering orders or if I'm out on the farm." But anyway, after a lot of Dad persuasion, Don decided to give me a bit of a trial. So I took my bike in the opposite direction and rode that from Leafmore into Lady Baron, about the same 4K.
Right.
And started work there for Don.
And Don's connection to the island, it began in a pretty unique way, didn't it, with his father, Lou Bailey, being the first policeman stationed on the island. And Lou was kitted out with a Harley-Davidson motorcycle and sidecar attached. Did Don share stories of those days, of the policing?
Yes, he did. Well, see, Don had asthma. Lou was a policeman in Hobart at that time when he first started, went from Scottsdale to Hobart, and Don got asthma very bad. And the doctor said to them, "You need a sea change." And so Lou looked around for another job, transfer, and saw one here on Flinders Island where they wanted somebody especially to run the police boat. So he took the job and he stayed here for 21 years.
Oh.
And Don, yes, he loved the Harley and sidecar. Him and his mum used to sit in that and they'd go up the road to White Mark or whatever, But Lou, he wasn't just a policeman. He was great with the boats, as it turned out, and he used to do a lot of work for insurance agencies. If, someone's house burnt down or something burnt down, had to be inspected. So they would get him to go and inspect that and give a report. Also, he was the health inspector.
Oh.
So he used to go around the Bird Islands and check things out. And Grandad Tuck, on Dad's side, he did a run to Cape Barren twice a week in his boat. He did a mail run, took the mail to Cape Barren.
Right.
And Lou did too. He had to go to Cape Barren and...
I guess if there's accidents and things,
yeah,
they'd have to attend. So, Gwen, while you were working for Don, you and Don began dating and soon after married. What were those early years of marriage like as you and Don began building a life together?
Well, I was only young, wasn't much over 18, but we did get married young in those days. And working at the shop, when I had David, I managed to take him to the shop with me. He walked at 8 months, Jacqui. And he used to get in amongst the bananas and the oranges and they'd be all mixed up in their boxes. And so we had a playpen. We put a playpen there with a big rug in it. But then we had the problem of people coming in buying chocolates and feeding him chocolates. But anyway, I survived that. I really loved taking him to work. I wanted to be a mother that looked after my own child. I didn't want to leave him with Nanny.
Yes.
But when I fell pregnant with Greg, I said to Don, oh, this isn't going to work, I can't do two here in the shop. So we decided to sell the shop. But before that, talking about the shop, we had a big Nissan shed up behind the shop, and that was chock-a-block with groceries and everything in it.
Oh.
And we used to fill the self-service store every morning from that Nissan shed. Don would go up, look around the shelves in the shop, go up to the Nissan shed and bring down whatever was needed and fill the shelves. He was so entrepreneurial, he used to even get watches through Norfolk Island so he didn't have to pay that big tax on them.
So it sounds like that you and Don were enjoying life, even though working hard and juggling children. I heard you were often off to dances and known to finish a night of dancing with a Bailey's Irish Cream as a nightcap.
Yes.
Can you paint us a picture of those dances and the fun evenings and even the people that were in attendance?
Well, the dances were great. We used to have a dance quite often. They were once a fortnight, usually once a month. There was a picture theatre as well, so we had the pictures, but I'll tell you about that after the dances. So I loved Elvis Presley, and I learned to dance on the deck at home, on the veranda, doing rock and roll with a straw broom, sweeping the veranda. It was how I learned to taught myself to rock and roll. So we used to go to all the dances. If there was a dance, we'd be there. And, well, they were held in three centres: the Emitter Hall, the Church Hall at Lady Barron, which was right next door to the church, and the old GAC Hall at Whitemark, which is now Carol Cox's flattened big garage. So we would go to all the three centres, and sometimes Walter Bryant would play with his old gramophone. And then in later years, there was a local band of Dad and Ernie Cook and Alfie Cook, and Ellis and Trevor Maynard used to play guitars, and so they'd all get together and we'd have this great music, the old barn dances and Pride of Errands and waltzes and foxtrots.
Oh,
yeah,
fantastic.
Great times, great times.
Good fun.
Yeah. The picture theatre was the building that's now in Whitemark belonging to Klaus. That building was on the opposite side of the road next to the church.
Oh.
And that was our picture theatre run by Leedham Walker. And he used to have pictures every second Saturday night, I think it was. He had to sort of fit in with the dancers as well. But the dances were always on a Friday night and the pictures on a Saturday night. So you'd sit on these old wooden seats and you'd have a lolly at half time. You could buy lollies and cordial. And a lot of great movies came through that old hall.
Oh, I bet. Oh, I wish we could do that again now. That would be so much fun, wouldn't it?
I think the life back then, there was more activity with people getting out to those things than there is today. The introduction of television on the island really created problems with the dances and
With
the pictures
community.
and that sort of thing, yeah.
I agree, yeah. So there's a wonderful story about Don waking you at 6 o'clock one morning with a new idea. Can you tell us what happened that morning and what his plan was?
Oh, yes. Don could think of things to do at the blink of an eye. I don't know how he ever did it. We were on the farm then. We'd bought this Aggie Bank house that they sold because they wanted to split the farm up and give a block to each of the three farmers on the opposite side of the road, which were Milroy Brown, Jimmy Nelson and Eric Henwood. And so we bought the house for £4,300. The house, a barn and shearing shed and 15 acres. And we'd borrowed and he was developing all the land opposite that we'd bought from Crown Land. Anyway, this year he came home this day and he said, I don't know what we're going to do. And I said, what do you mean? He said, the price of stock has gone down. All we can get for our good steers is $73 a head. And today they're worth $2,500.
Yeah.
And he said, we've got this loan to pay back. I've got to think of something. And I thought, well, he certainly will. So we went to bed that night and he woke me at 6:30 in the morning saying, Gwen, I've just thought of what I'm going to do. And I said, oh, well, what's this? And he said, well, you and I, we're going to get together and we're going to get up there to that barn. We're going to block one end of it in and concrete the floor, and I'm going to sell, well, at that stage he wanted to sell John Deere tractors, which he did start with the John Deere. He sold a couple of John Deeres. It wasn't long and he heard about the little brown and white David Brown.
Oh, yes.
And so we blocked the end of this barn in and we concreted the floor with the old hand concrete mixer. He started selling these tractors, and once he got into the David Brown, he sold 88 of those on Flinders Island.
That's incredible.
It is incredible, and thank goodness for the Soldier Settlement Scheme, because it was a lot of those farmers that bought them. But, you know, I know that Jim Luddington had 2 and David Blunston had 2 because he used them for his hay making.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, so that was the beginning of what he decided to do to get us out of trouble on the land when the prices were low.
So Don was quite an entrepreneurial spirit, wasn't he?
Oh, he was. He was, because, you know, it didn't stop there either.
Yeah, so what else did he...
Well, as time went on, he decided this was pretty good, this business side of things, so we decided to clear the bit of land we had behind the house and start a workshop. So we put up 2 bays, spare parts and an office to begin with, and started work in that. And by that time, David was almost ready to leave school and he wanted to be a mechanic. Right. But Mingo came and worked for Don.
Really?
Mingo worked for us.
Yes, I forgot that he was a mechanic.
Yes, he was a great diesel mechanic, Mingo. By then we had lighting plants everywhere and he used to do all the fishing boat work. So Mingo and Don would be down there working on all the engines in the fishing boats, keeping them going to sea to get the fish.
Yeah, and I imagine being the soldier settling, that all of the lighting plants, there would be a lot of those.
Definitely, because we had no power.
Yeah.
So he used to sell Lister and Petter.
Right.
Plants, and he installed them and, yes, got them going because, you know, even then he could do the electrical work.
Right.
You know, as time has gone on, you need a mechanic and an electrician and a roofer and all these different things. But back then, you know, builders did a lot of the stuff themselves and mechanics did. You know, it was just how they were. Yes.
Gwen, I have heard a story about Don driving an old tractor down Pickford Hill and the brakes failing. Do you remember Don telling you about this hairy experience?
Yes, I do. I do remember that. I don't know what sort of a tractor it was, but yes, he sort of just started to go down that slope and the brakes just weren't coming on for him to slow it down, and he had to kind of just keep driving because there's that corner at the end of the hill. Yeah, so he just had to drive it around. I think his heart was up in his mouth. He was just balancing on very, very good luck to get around that corner.
It's a little ironic that the brakes failed for the mechanic driving, or in this case, riding.
He may have been taking it out to the Aggie Bank to work on it. I'm not sure really what the tractor was and where he was taking it, but I reckon he was taking it to do work on it.
Yeah.
And perhaps it needed the brake work doing.
Obviously, yeah. So while Don was running the machinery business, and also you helped manage the farm with his father Lou, what do you remember most clearly about that time?
Putting out the hay. We had square bales in those days, hundreds of them. So my job, because Don was in the workshop then, and we had David and Greg as well, they used to come. They were quite handy on the farm, the boys. But we used to have to load the ute with 30 bales of square hay. We might have to do 3 or 4 trips and take them out and throw it over the fence to all the stock. And I was doing this one day, Jacqui, and I lost my wedding ring.
Oh, no.
I'd lost a bit of weight after I had the 2 boys, and it must have been a bit loose, and throwing out the hay over the fence, and it wasn't till that night I got home that I missed it. And we went back in, you know, we searched that fence line, never found it.
Oh, it's inside a cow somewhere.
Well, I reckon it's under the ground. It's probably been ploughed up since then.
Oh, Gwen, that's sad, isn't it?
So I used to do that, yes, and we used to move the stock. We had 2 farms. what we call Domaloo 1 and Domaloo 2. And we used to move the stock quite often from farm to farm, 4Ks down the road. So it was always Lou and I that moved them down the road. He would drive the ute and I would walk.
So, Gwen, do you recall the day you were involved in a little bit of an incident on a boat in Lady Barron? I hear that you may have got a little wet.
That was one of the three peaks. This must have been one of my children telling you this story.
Yeah, that's correct.
It was one of the three peaks, and we had a Haynes Hunter at that stage, a 25-foot Haynes, and Don had taken people out for a bit of a run around to see some of the boats still coming in. And I was a support crew for one of the boats, and I'd been up the road. And so I got back down to the wharf, and Don came in and he yelled to me, could I go down the main wharf and get aboard Lee Cox's boat and take a line for him, because the boats were tied up. There was no space for him to actually get in alongside the wharf. He had to tie up against another boat. So I went down the main wharf and looked at Lee Cox's boat and thought, oh, that's fine. The tide was high. I didn't have far to jump off the wharf onto the deck of Lee's boat. So I did that. I jumped onto the deck, onto this black rubber mat, which wasn't a black rubber mat on the deck. It was a black rubber mat over the crayfish well, and I went straight through into the well with the crayfish.
Oh, my goodness.
I was floundering a bit because I'd hurt my left ankle going down, and the police boat was tied up on the other side of the wharf, and a policeman, Lee Stanley, came rushing across. He saw it all happen, and he came rushing across with a bucket of ice, and he got me up onto the main wharf and sat me on a stool and plonked my foot really solidly into this big bucket of ice. I was wet right up to the armpits.
Oh, Gwen.
And, you know, the ambulance was always there on Three Peaks Day for any emergency that might happen. And I was the only patient, I think, in any of the Three Peaks races. Oh, dear. Experience makes you wise.
Yes, yeah. So family is such an important part of your story. Would you like to share a little about your children and your grandchildren, and perhaps some of the moments that have been especially meaningful along the way?
Yes, well, we had 4 children. David was the eldest, then Greg, then Julie, and then Melissa, who was 11 years. So David was 14, Greg was 12, and Julie was 11 when Melissa was born. So she was like a second family in a way, because I'd given everything away and I had to buy, you know, a bassinet and a pram and all that gear that you need. But I always had babysitters. You know, if Don and I still wanted to go out to a dance or party or something, we had good babysitters. David was a marvellous babysitter, and Melissa just adored him. So life was good, you know, life was good. And then as they got married, we ended up with 8 grandchildren. Each child had 2. So David had a boy and a girl, Greg had 2 boys, Julie had a boy and a girl, and Melissa had 2 girls. So it kind of evened it up. I had the 4 boys and 4 girls.
Yeah.
Great times, because I did a lot of babysitting. I was able to, with doing the bookwork for the firm, I was able to babysit Tara and David. I had Sam and Brandon quite a bit, but as you know, they had health issues, the boys, but I loved to have them, and we used to take them on the farm a lot. If we were checking stock, we'd take the boys with us. And then Ella and Lucy, I managed to be able to have those while Melissa was working. So, I think that's great for a grandparent.
Absolutely.
It really brings you back down to earth again, you know, to have your grandchildren in the house. And, it keeps you young, to be able to read to them, to be able to dance with them. Grandchildren are great, and, you know, there's always that old saying, you can give them back when you're ready.
That's right. So, Gwen, you served the Flinders Island community as a lay reader for nearly 3 decades. What first inspired you to take on that role, and what kind of training and support did you need along the way?
Well, I'd always gone to church, even as a small child. It was always, you know, the family thing to go to church. So my faith built, And I did teach Sunday school at one stage when I was about 16, 17. And then there was a minister here. We were having problems raising money to keep a minister, to pay that stipend. And there was a minister here and he said, a time may come when you may not have a minister full time and we need some lay readers. And so he actually talked Jan Henning and I into being lay readers, and we used to have to go away to grammar 3 or 4 times a year whenever the kids were on holidays so that we could stay in the grammar accommodation. It was always weekends. People from all over the state of Tassie would come to do this training. Then the ministers would be there and they'd form you into groups and you'd sort of go around and choose what you wanted to learn. So I learnt about funerals, I learnt about giving communion, visiting people in hospital, and of course we had a lot of Bible study to learn the Bible better. So after a couple of years, Jan and I became lay readers together. I've got beautiful photos of us getting our gown and our medal, because that's what it was back then. We don't wear them nowadays, but back then we always wore this gown with the medal round our neck. I took church services, but my greatest love, it seems unusual to say this, was to do the funerals, because I always thought of the people left behind, and I just wanted to be able to, I think, knowing people, knowing everyone so well, I could talk about that person, but I could also look after the ones that were left because I knew them as well. And so I started doing that. Jan and I both started doing the funerals, but she gave it up some time ago. I did it for 29 years. And I had people like John Cooper, your dad. When I did Mrs. Fowler's at the Emitter Church, he said to me, I want you to bury me, and so did John Chapman.
Oh.
And, of course, I've retired now and John's still going strong, which I'm very glad about.
Well, you were at school together, so it's going to be a toss-up, isn't it?
It is going to be a toss-up. But I was very fortunate to be able to do Jan's funeral, because she'd asked me, we'd made a sort of a joke, if you go first, Jan, you bury me. And she'd say, if you go first, Gwen, I'll bury you and you'll bury me.
Yeah, it's really powerful. So how did those experiences shape you personally, do you think, Gwen?
Well, I think they made me... I never used to get emotional as much as I do these days. Before the funeral, I'd visit the family 2 or 3 times, and I think that would get me in a position where I knew I could do it. I knew I could go to the funeral that day and do it. And by going and visiting the family and having tears with them, and I think over the years I really love people. I think it's made me stronger in my faith. And that's when David had that accident, I thought, we'll never get over this, but I think it's my faith made me stronger.
That giving you that strength.
And, of course, I saw that eagle that day that landed on the car. It came out of nowhere and it landed on the windscreen of the car, and it kind of wrapped its huge wings right around I wasn't driving, I was sitting in the passenger seat, and Shirley Ray, my cousin, was driving and Julie was in the back. And it just came out of nowhere as we were heading along the road towards David's house, and it came and laid on the windscreen because she pulled up, and it wrapped its wings around the windscreen of the car, round to both side windows.
Wow.
And I'm sure that was a message telling me that everything's fine.
I'm sure.
Made the hair rise on the back of my neck, actually.
Yes.
But I don't know. I think my journey with God has certainly made me stronger. Yeah.
Yeah. And I understand there was a moment at the last funeral that you conducted that made you realise it might be time to step back from being a lay reader.
Yes, well, the cemetery at Lady Barron has got this, I don't know whether it's comes here, but it's got this tree that sort of grows flat across the ground. You've got to be so careful if you get your foot caught in it. It could have been Alan Holloway's funeral. I'm not sure whose funeral, But I went to move and my foot got under a piece of this and I thought I was going to fall into the grave. But AK was always beside me and he never ever let anything happen to me. He was great to work with, doing the funerals.
Perhaps that was a little sign too, Gwen.
I think it was a sign. It made me very aware of my collapsing ankle and I decided to retire from the funerals.
So after so many years of caring for others in the community, it felt like a gentle and fitting moment to recognise all that you've given and perhaps the importance of taking some time for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I was glad I did in a way because, see, David's accident followed that. That was the March. And then his accident was the August.
Goodness.
So I was glad in a way because, I needed time, lots of time.
Yes, you did. Yeah. So I might gently shift us to a more personal chapter of your life, Gwenny. Later in life, Don became quite unwell. Can you share a little about what was happening for him during that time?
Yes. Well, see, Don, like a lot of men, had an enlarged prostate. And back then we didn't have health care, which I'd advise people it's a good thing to have, even though it's costly. And he was on the waiting list for a board job. That's what they called this enlarged prostate. We were carving at the time and the call came through that his name had come to the top of the list. And he told them he couldn't go because we were carving, which put him back to the end of the list. And he didn't tell me about that call. I had no idea. The first thing I knew was that he was unwell and he wasn't telling me that he was having breakfast and going behind the garage and losing it every morning.
Oh, goodness.
He was nauseous and he had an accident in his work ute and was flown out to Launceston and they found that his kidneys had backed up with fluid. They put him immediately onto dialysis in the renal unit there and he came right to a certain extent. He had to stay on dialysis and we chose to do the peritoneal training, or I did, to bring it back to Flinders. So I did the training at Kings Meadows in the renal unit and we both had to do it. He had to do it because he had to know. And, Rose could not make him understand that this was really a crucial moment in his life. And she came to me and she said, Gwen, I can't make him understand about this, that his kidney's failing. And she said, what can I do? And I thought about it and I said, Rose, he sells pumps. You talk to him. I said, our heart's a pump. Our kidneys are a pump. You talk to Don about pumps and you tell him what the pumps do in our body, like he's selling pumps to people to pump their water on their farms to their cattle. And she did that and he understood straight away.
Genius.
So we did the training at Kings Meadows and it took us 6 weeks. Because we were coming home to Flinders where we really had no backup because the hospital didn't know much about the peritoneal side of dialysis. So we had to be self-sufficient. We had to do it all ourselves and I didn't want any infections or anything like that. And he was on that for 4 years.
And in 2006, you gave Don a truly remarkable gift. Do you feel comfortable sharing with us what that was?
Yes, well, he didn't want me to do that. I said to Rose Mace, I said, I'll give him a kidney because we had talked about having transplants, but there was a waiting list. There was a long line at that stage. And at that stage, I was one of the first women in Tasmania. There were 4 of us.
Yes.
And I was one of those 4 that went to Melbourne and gave their husbands a kidney.
Remarkable.
Because, you had to be compatible and normally it was a sibling or a parent. It was never a wife. And so I did all the tests and found I was compatible. And I said, I'm doing this. Yeah, so we went off to Melbourne in the August of 2006 with Molly and Melissa as our carers. We had to have carers, so
right.
Molly and Melissa came with us. We had the transplant.
What a beautiful thing to do for your partner. And for a while you were both managing his health so well, but sadly things later took a turn and you lost Don in.
Well, what happens with transplant, you have to be on an anti-rejection medication. You go on the full whatever they think at the time, and that has to be weaned down. I don't know what happened with Don and the specialist in Tassie, but he got really, really sick, and I rang the specialist and said, look, Don's really sick. I'm sure it's medication, something to do with medication. And they said, oh, no, we've looked at his medication, that's fine, and even the doctor's here. And in the end, he was flown out. He was so ill he could barely walk, and he was still on the full dose of anti-rejection medication, and it had put ulcers on the kidney I gave him.
Oh, Gwen.
So he had to go back on dialysis. But, you know, in that time of him having my kidney, we took many, many trips into Australia. We did the boat cruise out to Vanuatu, and that was funny because Baxter, who owned the dialysis machine, rang me and they said, Gwen, you're Don's nurse and you're taking him on this cruise. Have you ever thought what might happen if that boat's, you know, with the swell of the sea, the machine won't work?
Oh.
I said, I hadn't even given that a thought. I said, tell you what, put in some free line and I'll hang it on the back of the door of the cabin and we'll be fine. And we did the cruise. They put in the free line. We never had to use it because the trip was fantastic. Every day was calm. We had a most wonderful fortnight out there on the ocean because he loved the ocean. He loved the sea.
Beautiful memories.
Yeah.
So one of the most important parts of life is the people that we hold close. So Gwenny, your eldest son, David, was deeply involved in the family business. And I understand that you shared lunch together most weekdays, a special time to connect and hear about each other's day. His passing in 2024 in such tragic circumstances was a devastating loss for you, your family and the wider community. If you feel comfortable, could you share a little about that time for you and your family?
It was a very hard time because David was the leader of the pack, so to speak. You know, when Don died, I mean, think Don was probably the leader and then David fell into that role. Mm. And say, for instance, if anyone in the family wanted a car, they'd go to David. You know, what car do we need, David? Can you find one for us? You know, even the grandkids in Hobart have rung David and said, Uncle David, we need a car. In the business, I mean, he was just incredible in the business. I guess he was like Don. I could do the bookwork, but that kind of sales stuff, you know, because we had agencies like Still and Honda, and we used to have to go to all those conferences and dinners that they had, and he did all of that once Don passed away, he and Marguerite. But, you know, if anybody had a birthday, we'd say, oh, you know, it's such and such's birthday. He'd say, that's all right, we'll have a barbecue at home, we'll have the party up there. Well, we might go to Mountain Seas this time. You know, he was at the moment, we're a bit like a boat without a rudder.
Yeah. I do remember David fondly, always with a smile and time for a chat. Gwenny. Mm.
He was a bit of a devil. He could torment and he could play pranks. He used to play pranks on Ella and Lucy. They used to walk in from the bus stop and they'd choose to walk through past the workshop, and he'd watch the clock and he'd hide behind one of the walls of the sheds and he'd go tearing out at them and doing all sorts of things, you know. Sometimes he'd have something over his head, or he was a real larrikin in lots of ways, you know. Yeah.
So much fun for them.
Yeah.
So, Gwenny, over the years that you've lived here, there must have been many people who have shaped your life. Are there one or two that you haven't mentioned yet that really stand out to you?
Well, one of the biggest persons, when she's not here anymore, was my grandmother, Grandma Cook. She was just a wonderful person, and I still think of her when the kids were little, and because Granddad had died when I was only young, and she'd ring me up and she'd say, Gwen, could I come and stay with you for a couple of days and just be there with the children, you know? And so I'd put Julie into another bed and fix the bed up for Grandma. She was just a wonderful person with wonderful advice. I guess Mum was the same, but I think I could talk to Grandma more. And Grandad Tuck, he was just a wonderful... I remember sitting on his knee and he'd tell me, because back then we had a lot of shipwrecks, He'd tell me about this shipwreck or that shipwreck, and I remember one he told me about, and it had these horses on it, and I remember I cried when he told me about the horses squealing, you know, as the boat was going down. There's been lots of people in my life that have given me strength and encouragement and wisdom and love, you know. I think love makes the world go round.
Absolutely. So what is it about Flinders Island that has kept it home for you all these years?
Well, I love the lifestyle, you know. I mean, just think, where else could you go to bed at night, leave your window open, your door unlocked, your key in the car, even though it's in the garage, and, you know, you walk down the street, you know, everyone waves, everyone sings out. I've been around a little bit to other places. Bruni, for instance. Bruni's very much like here. I'd never leave this place. There's so much love out there, so much friendship, but so much love. You take the bushfires. How did everyone pull together? They may not talk to their next door neighbour very often, but you take a bushfire, everyone is there together, aren't they? All the women are doing the cooking to serve the men that are working so hard. It's an amazing place, really. To me, it's just a beautiful, beautiful place of beautiful people.
Gwen, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with me today. Your life is a beautiful reflection of the spirit of these islands, from your family's deep roots stretching back to Vansittart Island and Badger Corner, to the life you and Don built together here on Flinders Island, raising a family, farming the land and creating a successful business. You've also given so much to this community through your service as a lay reader, quietly supporting people through some of life's most meaningful and beautiful moments, and difficult moments too. Yeah. And your story reminds us of the strength that comes from family, faith, hard work and service to others. Thank you for sharing your memories, your humour and your wisdom with us today.
Thank you, Jacqui. It's been wonderful, wonderful to tell my story.
We acknowledge the ancient history of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people as the first people of Latitude, Tasmania. This episode is recorded on the lands and waters of the Furneaux Islands. We recognise the continuing spiritual and ancestral connections of Tasmanian Aboriginal people to these islands, and we honour the strength, resilience and living culture of Aboriginal people today.